Right, good evening members, and welcome to the Review Committee meeting. Before we start the meeting proper, I would like to do the emergency evacuation announcement. Can I apologise for my glasses? I'm just trying them out. They're very focal, so if I lose my way, it's because of the glasses. Should we be required to evacuate the building, would you please leave the building via the hall entrance doors? Turn right, walk straight past the canteen and through the external doors on the right and out to the car park, which is our assembly point. Please do not delay your evacuation to collect any belongings. Please do not return into the building until given permission to do so by council staff. Please note that the meeting will be audio recorded. Would you please switch your mobiles off or turn them on to silent? Members, there are 4 microphones on the tables for use during the meeting. When I invite you to speak, please wait until there is a microphone in front of you before speaking, as microphones are needed for the hearing loop and for the audio recording. Please, where possible, assist in passing microphones to each other and use the hand gel and antibacterial wipes on the tables if you do touch the microphones. Members, voting will be done on a show of hands in line with the Constitution. I will ask for a show of hands and for and then against recommendations. Those abstaining from voting will be noted by officers. So agenda item 1 is apologies for absence, and we've had 1 apology from Councillor Mrs Pavling. Agenda item 2, substitute members. There is no substitute members. Agenda item 3, non-members attending. Councillor Simon Wootton and Councillor Simon Smith are in attendance. Agenda item 4 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of October 2021. Are the minutes agreed, members? Okay, thank you. We're agreed. Agenda item 5 is to receive declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest, members? Okay, there are none. Okay. Moving on to agenda item 6, which is the 2021/22 Mid-Treasury Management Review. Naomi Lucas, the Assistant Director of Resources, will introduce the report, and Councillor Simon Smith, the portfolio holder for financial services, is also in attendance for this item. So, Naomi, would you like to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to provide an update of the Council's Treasury Management activity for the period 1st of April 2021 to the 30th of September 2021, in accordance with the Council's Treasury Management Policy and Good Practice in Treasury Management. It's recommended that the Review Committee notes the contents of the report and provides any comments or questions it may wish to before it's presented to full Council for approval next week on the 7th of December. The Council has adopted SITFA's Code of Practice on Treasury Management, and a requirement of this is to produce a mid-year review to look at the authority's performance in line with the strategy which was approved by this committee in February. So the mid-year report, as I say, has been prepared in compliance with that code, and I'll just run you through briefly through the main sections of the report, which include an economic update for the financial year to date, provided by our Treasury Advisors link, and also a review of our compliance against the strategy, including our capital expenditure and indicators, a review of our investment portfolio, a review of our borrowing strategy, and a review of our compliance with our Treasury and prudential limits. So at paragraph 3 of the report, which is on page 6.2, we provide a brief economic update of the current situation, which essentially sets out the Monetary Policies Committee's latest sort of policy in terms of their interest rate setting, and members will note that the bank rate is unchanged currently at 0.1%, which it has been at for a number of months now. It was expected that that may rise the last time that they met, but it was held at that level. Our Treasury advisors are now advising that they think it will rise to 0.25% in December, and then further to 0.5% in June, but obviously that's only a forecast at this stage. There's obviously a number of significant risks to the forecast, including the ongoing impact of COVID-19, and those risks are summarised at paragraph 3.6. So in terms of the Council's own activity in the year to date, at paragraph 5, members will note the capital expenditure that the Council has incurred against the original budgetary estimates. So at the start of the financial year, we were forecasting that we would spend around 3.6 million on capital expenditure. That current forecast has now been revised down to just under 1.5 million. And the main reason for that is the pause and review of the Council's asset delivery programme, which is now profiled to occur slightly later than originally envisaged. So the just under 1.5 million, which was due to be funded from the hard soft infrastructure reserve, is now not forecast to be spent in this financial year. So that's the major driver of the reduction in the capital expenditure for this year. But members will note the other means of financing the capital expenditure, which is also set out in the table. In terms of the Council's borrowings strategy, members will note that we've not currently approved use of any external borrowing. So the Council's underlying need to borrow, as showed in the capital financing requirement table at 5.3, is unchanged. So moving on to section 6 of the report, which sets out the Council's investment portfolio. Members will note that we started the year with £17 million of investment placed. During the first 6 months of the year, we've placed another 40 million, but also withdrawn 35 million, which leaves us with a closing balance of £22 million invested. And on top of that, we have just over 1.5 million in our current account. All these figures are at the end of September of this year. So members can also see the way that those balances have changed throughout that 6 months. And you'll note there's a spike at the beginning of the year when we were given some additional COVID monies for businesses to distribute, and then the balances fluctuated slightly, but remained roughly constant since that point. At table 6.4, you can note the breakdown of where our monies were invested as at the 30th of September. The table shows the breakdown of the investments, but also the interest rate that was achievable on those, which was previously requested by members of this committee. And just to note that we've achieved interest returns of just over £12,000 for the first 6 months of the year. So we're forecasting to make just over 25,000 by the end of the year. We didn't actually budget anything for interest for this financial year because the interest rates were so low at the start of the year. But yeah, we have had slightly higher balances than we originally forecast. You can see from the investment performance table that our performance on our investments has exceeded the benchmark returns across the different categories of investment duration. So finally, I just want to confirm that the Council has complied with its own Treasury management strategy, and there's no breaches to report for the first 6 months of the year. So at this point, I would just like to recommend the contents of the report and ask if members have any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dray, you're indicating that you have questions?
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, my questions relate to paragraph 5.1 on page 6.4. We've had an explanation this evening in regards to the drop in the forecast for the hard-soft infrastructure reserve, but I wonder if there's an explanation as to the drop for the capital finance reserve, which has gone from 1263 down to 854. Also, Chairman, I'd like an update in relation to the potential future income from new homes bonus and or its replacement, if any. And also, I'd like details, full details, if possible, of all outstanding and potential 106 agreement income for all beneficiaries and the expiry dates for the same. Obviously, the potential income from 106s is fairly substantial, I would suggest. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Naomi, can you answer those questions, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll do my best. So I just wanted to clarify with relation to the first point in terms of the capital expenditure figures. They're not actually the total sort of balances of those reserves. They're just the planned use of those reserves in year. So as I mentioned, yeah, as you said, the hard to soft infrastructure reserve, there's a change in the forecast in terms of how we use that for this year. The capital finance reserve, again, there's a reduction in what we're planning to use from that reserve. That's not necessarily the total balance that is available, but in terms of how we fund our capital programme, we basically look at what specific funding streams we have available. So, for example, with the Disabled Facilities Grant, we know we have a specific grant available to fund that expenditure. The Capital Finance Reserve is basically used as our kind of pool of monies which are available to fund any kind of capital expenditure. So because the overall forecast in capital spend has decreased, so correspondingly the call on the Capital Financing Reserve has also decreased in year. So I hope that answers that one. In terms of the new homes bonus, there was a consultation on that earlier in the financial year, which closed in February. There has been very little in the way of clarity from government around what they intend to do with the future of that scheme, but we are hopeful that when they announce the provisional finance settlement in December, there will be details of whether that scheme will continue or whether a replacement scheme will be put in place for that. And then finally, in relation to the Section 106 monies, if I may, I'd just like to point you to a report which was taken to the Council's executive in July 22nd. There was a specifically a detailed report setting out all the available Section 106 monies and their planned use, and that's intended to be a regular report. So that information is out in the public domain and available on CMIS if you would like to look at that. And if you've obviously got any follow-up questions, then I'm happy to try and answer them outside the meeting.
Thank you, and thank you, Chairman. I shall look at that report.
Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Has this gone off? I'm good with mics. Right, thank you, Mr Chairman. Now we've got the technology sorted. There seems to be an echo. Just a couple of quick questions. I do thank the officer for including the interest rate because it does actually give us a better view on how our money is being invested. The one other bit of information I'd like, I mean, the money prime market and instant markets are obvious, but we've got two 95-day accounts there. They could have been 95 days from the 1st of September, 30th of September, or to the 1st of October. So is it possible, do you have the information of when that 95 days started?
It's basically a rolling 95-day period, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so it's a 95-day notice account then,
Yep.
not a 95-day account. There is a difference. Okay, thank you, that clarifies. So they're both 95-day notice accounts.
Yes.
Yes,
so,
thank
yeah.
you. Thank you. No, that's fine. That answers the question. Thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chairman. Naomi, I'm afraid I'm going to ask you a question that I must apologise that you work for an organisation where most members come from a background where we don't understand the stuff you do. So please forgive me. I didn't realise that the council had investments, so for the benefit of myself, who've only been on the council 2.5 years, and maybe some of the other members, could you just explain to me what the council invests money in, how we invest? I didn't realise we had that sort of money to invest, or am I looking at this the wrong way? Because you're talking about council investments. I wonder if you could just explain what that means.
Okay, I'll do my best. Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, I mean, essentially the council holds cash balances. It doesn't necessarily mean that all of those cash balances are available for the council to do what it wants with. We obviously have obligations in terms of paying, our wage bill, our suppliers, our precept payments, for example. But at any one point in time, we are generally holding a level of cash, which we obviously can't just hold in our bank account, so we need to do something with that money. In terms of how we invest the money, that's agreed through this committee in terms of our investment strategy and what kind of investments the council's willing to participate in and the duration of those investments. So when we set the Treasury Management Strategy at the beginning of the year, that sets those out. And then on a day-to-day basis, officers will make decisions in terms of, what available, what counterparties are available to invest in, which meet with that strategy and would deliver the best return available at that point. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah. So in other words, at the moment then, we've got £22 million worth of cash, if you like, invested in something that we physically... Right, I understand.
Yeah.
Totally understand. Thank you very much.
Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chairman. Following on from Councillor Dre's questions, on the hard-soft infrastructure reserve, and I understand the word reserve, but that 1.49 million, was that intended, was there behind that some kind of spending plan? Was there hard-soft projects that are supposed to be spent on? And if there were, what happened to them, in the sense that we haven't spent any of that money? And the second one, again following Councillor Dre, is on the S106. That's right, we did get a report in July. I think we were told it would be updated quarterly. And I haven't seen anything since the July version. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
Would you like me to repeat that? Right, it was a two-part question. Perhaps I could shout louder than the mic, but that's another story. Right, on the hard-soft infrastructure reserve, my question was 1.491 million was reserve. Was that with spending in particular projects in mind? And if so, what happened to those projects, given we didn't spend any? Or was it just a reserve that was supposed to stay as a reserve if not needed? And the second one was on the S106. It was presented to us in July as a report, and I think we were told it would be updated quarterly. So I haven't seen an update since July. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As mentioned earlier, the hard-soft infrastructure reserve was specifically set aside for the intention of financing the asset delivery programme. So the figure that's included there was the initial estimate of the asset delivery programme costs that were to be funded this year. As I say, because those haven't been incurred, that's why there's the variation in the spend noted in the table. So that was for a specific purpose. In relation to the Section 106 monies, I did have a quick word with the officer who's brought forward the report previously. I think the intention originally was to do them quarterly. I think that may still be the case, although I know obviously it would be another one due kind of about now. I think the reality is that there's usually not a huge amount of change within a 3-month period, so probably what will happen with obviously executive's agreement, it would be better to bring it back every 6 months, but I think we will seek to just confirm that outside of the meeting and obviously give you an update at the next executive meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, members. No one else is indicating. So, oh, sorry. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Not intended as a rebuke to Councillor Wilkinson at all, just as a general comment, but we do hold Treasury Management training once a year. The last one was 14th of September and only 5 members attended, so and that is refreshed on an annual basis. So there is the opportunity for members and starters, and obviously not just yourself, to find out the wider details of Treasury Management. As members can hear, the vast majority of Treasury Management is delegated to officers because it is specialist knowledge that is required, it is specialist advice that is undertaken, and it is decisions that are taken on a day-by-day basis. So it absolutely wouldn't be appropriate for members to discuss in a forum the precise nature of investments, but through our Treasury Management strategy, we do provide the strategic overview of what we do. The one thing that the report can't do, and I think the one thing that Naomi can't do, is at the top of the report talk about a very successful implementation of our Treasury Management and a very positive series of actions to manage the Council's finances. You could say perhaps that is subjective, and if I am being subjective, so be it. But I do believe that our mid-year Treasury Management Review reflects the very successful implementation of this policy in very challenging circumstances. Thank you.
There's no further indications?
Just the one thing to add is that, having said that, I must obviously now give due credit to Naomi and her team, hopefully on your behalf, for the work that they've done and the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, there is one recommendation set out at paragraph 9 of the report, which I will move from the chair, that the contents of this Treasury Management mid-year report be recommended to Council. Members, do I have a seconder? Oh, thank you. Councillor Mrs McPherson. Can those members in favour please raise their hands? Okay. Thank you. That was unanimous, so that is passed. We now move on to item 7, which is one that is of particular interest to this committee, which is the review by the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny. It's the Scrutiny Improvement Review. And I would like to invite Angela Law, Assistant Director, Legal and Democratic, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chairman. So the purpose of this report is to update members on the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny Improvement Review and consider the next steps. Overview and scrutiny committees were introduced in 2000 as part of the new executive arrangements to ensure that members of an authority who are not part of the executive could hold the executive to account for the decisions and actions that affect their communities. Overview and scrutiny committees have powers to scrutinise decisions that the executive is planning to take, those it plans to implement, and those that have already been taken or implemented. Recommendations following scrutiny enable improvements to be made to policies and how they are implemented. Overview and scrutiny committees play a valuable role in developing policy. For this council in 2019, the Local Government Association peer review was undertaken, which examined the council as a whole and identified key areas for improvement. Within these areas, performance for the overview and scrutiny function was highlighted as a cause for concern, with the following statement made: the council also needs to strengthen the scrutiny function, which members says does not play a positive role in policy development. The peer review proposed that the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny undertake work with the Rochford District Council to work with members and officers to ensure that the overview and scrutiny function is working effectively and to develop actions to help the function improve. The work of the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny to audit and review the review committee had been postponed up until this period due to the impacts and repercussions of the pandemic, which began shortly after the completion of the peer review. This work commenced in July 2021 and involved the Centre of Governance and Scrutiny undertaking a day of on-site meetings with members and officers, observing recordings of previous review committee meetings and reviewing key documents. The draft letter was then socialised with officers, the chairman, vice chairman of review, the leader and deputy leader for their initial observations. On the 9th of November, an informal meeting was held with the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny and members of the review committee and the executive to discuss the reports and its recommendations, to seek any feedback from members as to its conclusions and its contents. The next step is for the review committee to develop an action plan that will develop and meet the recommendations of that letter. At this point, Chairman, I'd like to hand over to you.
Thank you. Before I ask members for their contributions, there's a couple of points that I would like to make. The purpose of the review that was undertaken is to improve the work of our committee, and it's ultimately there to improve the development of policy within the council for the benefit of our residents. The recommendations in the review, I believe, are all achievable, but they will require careful planning and commitment from the people involved. I see this year as a transition year to our new ways of working, because obviously we'll have to develop the new protocols. But I think that this will allow us to see how we want to be operating in the future. So from the next municipal year, definitely everything should be in place. And it was mentioned at the presentation from Ian Parry that really we should be trying to be like a parliamentary select committee, in as much as that we're apolitical and that we're there to hold the executive to account. And the report has got some good ideas about how we can undertake that. One of the recommendations is the establishment of a working group, and I'm pleased to say that a number of members have indicated that they wish to be involved. So obviously myself and Councillor Mrs McPherson will be on the working group, but Councillor Dray, Councillor Hoy, Councillor Myers, Councillor Mrs Gadsden and Councillor Mrs Gooding have all indicated that they would like to be part of the group. And that gives us 7 members, which is probably the ideal number, but if anyone else indicates that they would like to be a member, please let me know. What I don't expect it to be is 39 councillors on the working group, because we won't actually get anything done. So that's my contribution. So questions, Councillor Mrs Shaw, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I was at the presentation on the 9th of the 11th and I found it very, very informative. And this is more of a statement, I do apologise. And I hope with what you've just said, we can move forward and do a far better scrutiny. Thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 2 observations really from the report. It was really interesting to read, and it's really good to see the recommendations from the peer review actually in action now, because otherwise this report wouldn't have happened, so it's really positive to see. The 2 things that stuck out for me from the report were, the first one was about forward-thinking, forward-looking, which I think is really important, because my own experience of this is my 2nd year on this committee, and my own experience of this has been pretty much what most people is, which is noting stuff that's been coming through, which is one of the criticisms, and it's really positive to see that there's this recommendation, and I really embrace that. I think how we can do that, and it's the way I suppose this blends into the 2 things really, because this really, I know this is a political committee, but this shouldn't be the opportunity for us to bash people using a big political stick, because I don't think that's particularly helpful. At the same time, we are holding the executive to account, but we are all holding the executive to account in a constructive way. And I think that if we look at some of the projects that have been ongoing through the council and are in the future going to be going through the council, had they gone through this committee, then they may well have ended up in a slightly different way. And I use this as an example only, and not for making any political mileage whatsoever, and I'll assure you of that. But if we look at the asset delivery programme, for example, had that gone through this committee in the way in which this report is suggesting perhaps it should have done, or projects that size should have done, then I wonder if we would be in the situation we're in now, where we've had to go back and we're now, you know, because we didn't listen to the public engagement, there wasn't public engagement sooner, etc., etc., etc. So I think it's a really positive thing that projects this size, and I know at the group leaders meeting last night, the minority group leaders meeting last night, it was suggested with Jonathan that, for example, the partnership working with Brentwood Council is coming up in January, and we've asked for that to come to this committee in a draft format as well, which he's fully willing to do. So those are the sort of things that I think are really positive. The second thing really is the report talks about trust, and that really is a huge thing. And I think if we're all honest with each other, I think that's one thing that's lacking between the members is trust. And I can see the reasons why from both sides of the fence. But I think if we're to move forward on this, then that trust needs to be rebuilt. I don't profess to have the answers, but I would like, Chairman, if I may, to make a recommendation that perhaps when the terms of reference for the working group are formulated, that perhaps certainly members could give some consideration as to how we can rebuild trust. And I see that as a duty of not just the working group, but the 4 group leaders, all of whom we're all in here tonight, and also all 39 members of this council. But I think that's an important thing, and those are the two big things that stuck out for me from the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Councillor Wilkinson makes some very fair points, and and looking around, I think 80 or 90% of this committee won't realise is that the review committee used to be very robust and very effective, and it has lost its way in recent years. And I think this report reflects where we are, and we need to build back from that. I would urge a couple of words of caution. I think we need to be careful as a review committee to review, to analyse, to scrutinise and to recommend, and not to carry out the portfolio holders and the executive work. I think there is a danger there that sometimes there is a blend of that, and in recent years there was a situation where this committee almost ended up doing portfolio holders' role. That said, it is constructive, it's helpful, and it would be very good if, instead of us seeing completed reports that we then have to call in and try and change, that if we saw draft reports, and the draft reports we could then comment and analyse and give constructive criticism, so that those reports benefit the whole council and not just part of the council. So I do welcome this, and I would certainly be willing to go on the working group. I assumed that would be sorted out tonight, but if the chairman feels that 7 is adequate, I'm quite happy not to go on there. I don't want to handicap the council in any way. So thank you, Mr Chairman, and hopefully we will improve with this report's implementation.
Thanks, Councillor Mrs Mason. Although 7 is the ideal number, 1 more is always welcome. So thank you. I'd be happy to, if you want to be part of the working group, then please feel free to join.
Can I just ask, have we got representatives of all the groups on your working group? Because I think it would be helpful if that was the situation. I know you read out a list of names, but I'm afraid I didn't absorb them.
Well, the answer to that is no, but I did send an email out to every single councillor asking them if they wish to be on the group.
Yes, I think I certainly read it that we would be formulating that at this meeting. I didn't realise it was having to be done beforehand. Yeah. So perhaps others made the same error, but okay, that's fine. So we haven't.
Okay, right.
It's a shame, but never mind.
Councillor Drake.
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me? Chairman, I fully agree with all of your recommendations, and I look forward to being an active member of the working group. The review committee should be much more involved in projects from day one, when we can offer officers and/or the executive independent advice and scrutiny. Our work should concentrate far more on scrutiny than on review. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Before we go on to the recommendations, I invited the leader of the council along because I see the work that we're going to be involved in here is a partnership between our committee and the executive. And I'd just like to invite Councillor Wootton just to say how he sees this work going forward from the executive point of view.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you very much indeed. It's quite a challenge, isn't it, to review, and quite a bold step for the authority to actually sort of say, how can we actually do things better? Certainly the briefing in early November was extremely helpful, so that Mr. Parry was able to go through his report in detail. And as has already been said, the principle of review, and actually I happen to think the name review is rather wishy-washy. I think it should be about scrutiny. I think it should be about holding the administration to account and actually strengthening along the way the executive relationship with review. I believe it is about driving continuous improvement, and I think it is also about, and as Councillor Wilkinson alluded to, actually bringing reports in advance of the formal governance process to review, to scrutiny, to be scrutinised, to be challenged, so that we, as the administration, are held to account. And I think the asset delivery programme would have been good if it had gone through this process. I think certainly the Brentwood partnership going to review in advance of coming to a council meeting will be good, because it means that by the time it does conclude its path, hopefully we end up with a report which is stronger and has had challenge along the way, rather than reaching the council meeting where there are perhaps still some very reasonable questions to be tested. So I welcome this approach, Chairman. I fully endorse the approach that is being taken in this paper tonight of setting up a working group, and I would like to compliment and congratulate all members on taking this bold step to strengthen the scrutiny process. I certainly support it, welcome the review, welcome the outcome and all the recommendations. Thank you, Chairman.
Members, there are two recommendations which are set out at paragraph 9 on the report. And they are, which I will move from the chair. So first of all, do I have a seconder? Councillor Dray. Thank you. So the first one is that the contents of the final report letter dated November 2021 by the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny Improvement Review be noted as set out at Appendix 1 to this report. Is that noted, members? Thank you. The second is that a member working group of the review committee be set up to develop an action plan to deliver the recommendations of the Centre for Governance and Scrutiny. Can those members in favour please raise their hands? Thank you. That was unanimous. Thank you, members.
Chairman, if I may, just to confirm the members of your working group, the names, please, which is the chair, yourself, Councillor Mrs. McPherson, Councillor Dray, Councillor Hoy, Councillor Myers, Councillor Gadsden, Councillor Mrs Goodin and Councillor Mrs Mason.
Yeah. Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you. The wonders of technology, eh? Meant to make things faster. Just one thing I'd like to request, that the dates that this working group are meeting are notified in advance, well in advance, and perhaps set at the outset. Because recently the council have given us 2 days' notice, 3 days' notice of meetings, and members are particularly busy, and I'm sure we would like to attend. If we have adequate notice, then the majority of us probably will be able to attend. If we're given very short notice, it's going to be very difficult for us. So can I make that request, please, Mr Chairman?
Thanks, yeah, certainly. What I propose to do, or what my idea is, that I'll put together a sort of calendar of events and circulate that probably by the end of this week, and that will give the dates well into the future then, when we're going to have our meetings.
Thank you, yes, thank you.
We now move on to item 8, which is the key decisions document, and as usual I'll go through the table a line at a time. So on page 2 of the key decisions document, reference 04/21, the voluntary sector grant allocations 2022 to 23. Okay, no one indicating, thank you. Also on page 2, 09/21, which is the RIPA policy and RIPA social media guide. Okay, no one indicating, thank you. On page 311/21, the compulsory purchase of land at Michelin Farm, Rayleigh. Okay, no one's indicating. Again on page 312/21, the report of the Projects / Programme Management Office. Okay, again no one indicating. 13/21, which is the South Essex Parking Partnership. Councillor Mrs Mason.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask some questions on this, and I don't know if there's anyone here that can answer them. I read it says proposed new working arrangements for a new term of the partnership agreement. I've not noticed or seen anything about this, and it is a controversial agreement, and I wonder if we're going to be consulted or if that's something that we can look at before it's actually the decision is made. Or is it something that's going to be automatically done by the administration?
Thank you, Chairman, through you. I'm happy to answer that question. The report is due to come to the executive. It says on the key decisions document, therefore it isn't an automatic decision. In relation to the proposed partnership agreement, it relates to the terms of reference of the joint committee. Therefore, I would expect that documentation to be available. Through you, Chair, I can ask the portfolio holder to provide a written response to Councillor Mrs Mason's question.
Thank you.
Thanks, that would be useful. Thank you. Moving on to item 9, which is the work plan. Members, are there any questions on the work plan or any observations on the work plan? sorry, Councillor Mrs Mason, did you indicate?
No,
Oh, sorry.
I'm just wiping my hands after moving the mic, as instructed.
No one is indicating, so that is the
Chairman, sorry, you
Sorry.
can't see me, I'm right on, the other, on your blind spot. Chairman, if I can perhaps talk to the meeting of the 11th of January. Councillor Wilkinson has already made reference to the potential for the arrangements for the proposed partnership between this authority and Brentwood Borough Council to come to this venue ahead of any decision by the by full council in the fullness of time. And through you, Chair, I proposed that that the work plan accommodate that on the 11th of January meeting.
Thanks, that's fine. And
For pre-scrutiny, yes.
Yeah, and will the report be ready in time for that?
I'm writing it, so yes, it will be.
Okay, brilliant. Okay. The worst thing is when you set yourself a target and then you can't achieve it, so that's great. Right, no one else has indicated, so that is the final agenda item. So the meeting is closed at 2016. Thank you, members. And just as a reminder, the book of condolences at the front here. Thank you.